name is William J. Rothwell. You can call me Bill. I'm delighted today to be talking to you about Beyond Symbolic Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, one of my new books. And that particular book builds on the previous book written, Rethinking Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So those are two books in a related series. Let me explain. Of course, the topics diversity, equity, inclusion, and those that are related, such as belonging and social justice, have come along in recent years, and many organizations have committed to efforts to improve their organizational culture to welcome diversity, appreciate diversity, and they do it for business reasons, which is to increase innovation. Because we know from research that organizations that have diverse populations, and when I say diverse, I mean more than race and gender. I mean everything: age, background, upbringing, values, thought processes, anything you can think of. If we have a mixed group, we are likely to attack a problem and get better solutions. The research shows that, and that is the major justification for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in organizations today that are undertaken in order to benefit the organizational corporate culture. So in our first book, Rethinking Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, my co-editors and my contributing authors in that book talked about a frequent challenge that comes up in many organizations today, which is someone in the organization is handed the challenge of setting up a brand new diversity program in the organization. Or perhaps they're hired from outside the organization to do the same thing. But introducing a new diversity, equity, and inclusion program is essentially a corporate culture change effort. Unfortunately, a lot of people who are handed the task of setting up a DE&I program have no background in running organizational change efforts. So they don't know how to do it. How do you set up a new department? How do you set up a new program that hasn't existed before? How do you build acceptance and overcome resistance to change? How do you roll it out? How do you build effective policies around diversity, equity, inclusion, and related topics? How do you build training that will teach people the skills they need to demonstrate appreciation for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and such like? So in the first book, it's meant to be a helpful guide to basically coach first-time users who are tasked to set up a DE&I program with help so that they can do it. And it's organized in a step-by-step fashion. But as we wrote the book, we realized that, unfortunately, a lot of organizations today may be doing a great job once they've set up their DE&I program. Unfortunately, the surrounding community and society may still create problems around diversity, equity, and inclusion. In other words, we might have an organization that has a perfectly acceptable corporate culture that welcomes diversity, equity, and inclusion, but the surrounding community or society still persists in bias, prejudice, and other problems that affect the ability of people to live productively in society. So how do you solve that problem? If we can build a program inside an organization, what do we do about the surrounding community? In both books, we're heavily influenced by organization development. And OD is basically the humanistic approach to change. We call that the bottom-up approach. And we think of it as democracy in the workplace. In other words, we work with groups of people to reach shared understandings of what are the problems or the existing strengths of the organization, and then leverage those and overcome the deficiencies and build on the strengths. So OD stands in stark contrast to change management, which is essentially project management. Someone, usually managers, come up with the goals of the change effort. They come up with a budget. They come up with an action plan. Maybe a consultant comes in and gives people in the organization the plan. Unfortunately, no one accepts that plan except the consultants or the managers. And the workers resist the change effort. And this is why 70% of organizational change efforts fail. So, and another cause is the surrounding community does not support whatever that corporate culture change effort happens to be. So that leads to a field we call trans organization development. Organization development as a field tends to focus on change inside organizational borders, like launching a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. That could be an OD intervention or change effort. But trans organization development looks at implementing change outside the borders of an organization. And who could do that? Well, maybe the company or organization has an OD leader, in which case he or she might be well equipped to do that. But many organizations today are more likely to have a diversity officer, and that person is well positioned to integrate the internal change effort to build diversity, equity, and inclusion in the corporate culture, facilitate that process, and then take it to the surrounding community and encourage social change. So that's what those two books are about. And I encourage you to have a look at both of them. Thank you for listening.